Today, I thought we would take a few thrifted decor finds and explore how making just a few simple changes can turn someone else's trash into your home decor treasures.
I found these plastic plaques at a thrift store recently and I like their shape, but I wasn't really a fan of the color and the plastic looked cheap. To fix this, I was going to need some white chalk paint and, because it's my color, a bit of teal. This is Art Mind's chalk paint in antique teal, and I'm just going to apply that to the outside frame of each of the wall plaques. And then I'm also going to add it to the little bits that are sort of in between the decal that's in the middle. I want this to look like the decal is sitting on top and is separate piece from the frame. Once I had that all painted, I let it dry overnight. I want to do a crackle finish technique to the paint on the frame part of this, so I'm going to use some Elmer's glue to do this. This is a super easy technique anyone can do. You just want to take some of your glue and a paintbrush and just put a thin coat of the glue on top of your initial dried paint. Now you want to let the glue dry a bit until it becomes tacky, but you don't want it to completely solidify before you apply your next coat of paint. So I'm going in with the white chalk paint and I'm working in smaller sections, fully applying a nice thick layer of the white paint over the tacky glue. Okay, now this is when the magic happens. You're going to want to take your heat gun and you're going to want to use it to dry the paint, and as the paint dries, it will start to crackle and just add tons of texture. Now I also wanted to make sure that I got those little bits that I had painted teal, so I just went in with a bit of the glue and then over top of that applied the white paint and then just did the same thing with the heat gun. Likewise, I applied the same glue and chalk paint technique to the sides of the frame and then went in with that heat gun, warmed everything up and made those magical crackles appear. To finish everything off, I wanted to make that medallion look like it was wood that had been distressed paint. So I went in with a fan brush and a little bit more of that white chalk paint and gave it a distressed look. In my humble opinion, these no longer look cheap, but you let me know what you think in the comments below. For this next thrifted DIY, I found this wood round piece that used to have a cloche on top, but no longer had that. And I decided just to go in and scrape off all the little bits. They had some candle wax on this, and then just give it a nice wipe down to give myself a clean surface to work on. Now I wanted to darken this wood piece up a little bit more. I wanted to give it a rich, darker color, so I just went in with some Art Mind's antiquing wax and applied a couple of coats all over the entire thing, including the sides. Then I went into Canva and I created this Café de Paris sign, downloaded that as an SVG, uploaded it into my Canva, and then had my Cricut do the magic. Once Cricut had cut out the design, I peeled it away from the backing, and then this is where everything went a bit haywire. Now I should have used a heat transfer vinyl. I was cheap. I didn't want to go and buy another one. I decided to use permanent vinyl. Plus, my blade is obviously dull and didn't do a great job with the fine details. And my darling daughter and her beautiful nails had to help me out. Now, in the process, I did lose some of the curlicues. The fleur-de-lis did not come out quite as fancy as it was originally, but I burnished everything as well as I could and then carefully peeled back the transfer tape. Now again, I would have been better off using heat transfer tape. I did stain this wood piece a couple of days beforehand. I thought the stain would be completely cured by now, but as you're about to see, not so much. So I took my time and really scraping that with Cricut scraper and just trying to get the vinyl to really stick to the wood, but as you can see here, it didn't work that great. I had to painfully and slowly peel back the transfer tape, manually pressing things down onto the wood as carefully and slowly as I could. It was quite the process and took quite a long time, but I knew when I decided to use the permanent vinyl, I was taking a bit of a risk. So I decided to go in with a top coat to really adhere that vinyl to the wood piece and kind of give everything just a nice safety coat, since it didn't really go on quite as well as I'd hoped. Et voila, there she is. She turned out beautifully, even though it gave me a bit of a hard time getting it there. I kept coming across this newel post on my walks. It didn't seem to have a home or belong anywhere, and after a year I decided it was mine. I loved how it just looked so aged and worn and cracked with the distressed paint. It just was gorgeous. And it also had this very handy screw at the bottom that I was going to need. So I headed out to our scrap wood pile and found this little piece of wood. I'm sorry, I got a little excited, drilled the hole, forgot to video. But here it is with the hole in the center, and then the sides, two of the sides were freshly cut, so they didn't really match really well. So I just went in with a little bit of antiquing wax, lightly applied that, then went in with a baby wipe, wiped down any of the excess, and then using a piece of sandpaper, I just sanded that down a bit just to kind of make it look a little bit more old, worn, and fit in better with the rest of the block. All that was left to do was take the newel post, screw it into the block using pre-existing hardware, and there you have it, a simple, easy shelf decor piece that, in my opinion, incredibly charming. But let me know what you think. I found this sign at the thrift store a couple of years ago. I knew I needed to have it. At Jenny's place needed her own sign. I just wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do with it, so I let it sit there and waited for the right time to do this video. Now, no At Jenny place sign would be complete without the color teal. So again, we're going to use that antique aqua from Art Minds to apply to this sign. Now, I wanted to use a few different painting techniques with this. So one of them was the crackle technique again. So we're going to go in with a bit more of that Elmer's glue. And I put this on a bit thicker. I wanted the cracks to come out larger than the last DIY we did. Now, full disclosure, this didn't work as well as I wanted it to. I'm not quite sure why, but I'm guessing that it had to do with whatever application was on the sign already. I've done this on wood. I've done this on painted wood. I just did this on plastic, and I'm not sure why this came out differently, but it wasn't quite as effective. And then I let that dry slightly until each of the areas became tacky. Then, using a nice big thick paintbrush and some of that antique aqua chalk paint, I painted on a fairly thick coat on top of all of the glue areas. I did paint sort of the whole sign, working in a bigger area, which might have been why I might have let it dry too much, but I don't think so because it was so thick and still tacky, but whatever. And then I just applied it kind of thick where the glue was and distress painted it in other areas. Then I pulled out my heat gun again, and I used this to do two different things. So one was I used it to create those nice big cracks in the paint. I also used it on high and got close to the paint and waited until the paint bubbled up a bit, and then using my finger I popped those bubbles so that it would add a ton of texture to the sign along with the cracks and the distressed paint look. And then I did the same applications to the side. So some distressed paint, some with the glue so that we would get those cracks, and then in other areas using that heat gun to really apply that heat onto the paint, making it bubble up and add that extra amazing texture. Now, after everything had been allowed to dry overnight, I did find that there were some areas where the paint just kind of looked like it hadn't been applied properly and not so much like it was distressed. So I decided decided to just go in with a smaller paintbrush and touch up those areas that I thought could use just a little bit of a thicker coat of paint and kind of make everything just look a bit more cohesive. And there you go. At Jenny's place has herself a new studio sign. This last DIY is Rustic Meats Sparkle. I found this pampered chef pedestal and this gorgeous wood bowl and decided that I wanted to try to put the two of them together. To do this, I was going to need some E6000. Now, admittedly, I went a little too heavy-handed with the E6000, got a little carried away. I didn't really need to use this much. I really only needed to put a little bit around the rim because that's really the only place that ended up touching the bowl. But oh well, live and learn. So I placed the bowl on top, and then I placed a couple of my 10-pound weights, hand weights inside the bowl just to apply some pressure between the glass bottom, the glue, and the wooden bowl, and left that overnight to cure. And here you go. Tell me, what do you think?
Well, that's it for today's thrifted DIYs. If you enjoyed those, make sure you subscribe, give me a thumbs up. If you hit the notification bell, it'll let you know the next time I upload. Oh, and you might enjoy these.